Sometimes the best revenge comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes a mop and bucket can unlock doors that corner offices never could. What I discovered while emptying trash cans at midnight would make my former colleagues' jaws drop and cost my tormentors everything they'd stolen from me. My name is Samantha Rivers, and 6 months ago, I was the Director of Strategic Operations at Meridian Financial Solutions, a mid-sized investment firm where I'd clawed my way up from junior analyst over 8 grueling years. I had a corner office on the 32nd floor, a salary that made my parents proud, and a reputation for turning failing portfolios into gold mines. Then Blackstone Capital swooped in like vultures, acquired us for what seemed like a generous sum, and everything I'd built crumbled overnight. The acquisition was supposed to be a merger of equals, they said. We'd maintain our identity, our culture, our people. Marcus Blackstone himself, the silver-haired CEO who looked like he'd stepped out of a Fortune 500 magazine cover, personally assured our team that talent would be recognized and rewarded. I should have known better. I should have seen the predatory gleam in his eyes when he shook my hand and said, "Ms. Rivers, I've heard remarkable things about your work." 3 weeks after the acquisition closed, I found myself sitting across from Patricia Vance, Blackstone's Director of Human Resources, in a sterile conference room that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Patricia was one of those aggressively cheerful women who wielded corporate speak like a weapon, all bright smiles and empty platitudes. "Samantha," she began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I know this transition has been challenging for everyone. We're restructuring to eliminate redundancies and maximize synergies." I'd been expecting this conversation. Half our department had already been right-sized, corporate euphemism for fired. But I wasn't worried. My track record spoke for itself. I'd increased our division's revenue by 40% in the last 2 years alone. "I understand," I said, maintaining my professional composure. "Where do I fit in the new structure?" Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Well, that's what we need to discuss. Your position is being eliminated, but we value your dedication to the company. We'd like to offer you a role in our facilities management team." The words hit me like a physical blow. Facilities management? It's an important position, Patricia continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd learned to hate. "You'd be responsible for maintaining our work environment, ensuring cleanliness and organization. The pay is competitive within the industry standard for such roles." I sat there, stunned. They were offering me a janitor position. After 8 years of 60-hour weeks, after building relationships with clients worth millions, after proving myself in a male-dominated industry, they wanted me to clean toilets. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed. "I understand your disappointment," Patricia said, not looking the least bit understanding. "But these are the realities of corporate restructuring. You can take the weekend to think about it, but we'll need an answer by Monday." I wanted to tell her exactly what she could do with her facilities management position. I wanted to storm out with whatever dignity I had left. But I was 34, single, with a mortgage and student loans that wouldn't pay themselves. The job market was brutal, and finding something comparable would take months I couldn't afford. So I swallowed my pride and took the job. The first day was humiliating beyond anything I'd experienced. I showed up at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the office opened, wearing the navy blue uniform they'd provided. The name tag read, Sam, not even my full name, as if they were stripping away pieces of my identity along with my dignity. My supervisor was a weathered man named Frank who'd been cleaning office buildings for 30 years. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. "You sure you want this job, lady?" he asked, handing me a mop and bucket. "Most people don't go from suits to scrubs voluntarily." "It's temporary," I told him, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Frank shrugged. "That's what they all say. Come on, I'll show you the ropes." The work was backbreaking. I spent my days emptying trash cans, cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming carpets, and wiping down surfaces while my former colleagues pretended not to see me. Some looked uncomfortable when they passed me in the hallways. Others seemed to take perverse pleasure in my downfall. The worst was running into David Chen, who'd been my peer in the old company. He'd somehow managed to land a promotion in the new structure, scoring the vice president role I'd been gunning for. "Samantha," he said one afternoon, his voice full of false concern. "How are you?" "Adjusting." I looked up from the trash can I was emptying in his office. "Just fine, David. Congratulations on your promotion." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Listen, I put in a good word for you with the new management. I really tried." "I'm sure you did," I said, though we both knew he was lying. The nights were the hardest part. I'd go home to my empty apartment, muscles aching, hands raw from cleaning chemicals, and try to figure out how my life had gone so wrong. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every career decision, wondering if I'd missed some crucial sign that could have prevented this disaster. But it was during those late-night shifts that I first noticed something odd. I was working the evening shift, cleaning the executive floor after everyone had gone home. The building was eerily quiet, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 32 floors below. I'd been assigned to clean Marcus Blackstone's office, a sprawling corner suite that was bigger than my entire apartment. His desk was massive, mahogany and pristine, with expensive fountain pens lined up like soldiers and a computer that probably cost more than I made in a month. I was careful not to disturb anything as I dusted around his personal items, family photos, awards, and a collection of rare books that looked like they'd never been opened. That's when I noticed the filing cabinet. It was tucked behind his desk, partially hidden by a potted plant. Unlike everything else in the office, it looked worn, utilitarian. Most importantly, it was slightly ajar, as if someone had been in a hurry and hadn't quite closed it properly. I glanced around the empty office, my heart pounding. I knew I shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. I set down my cleaning supplies and approached the cabinet. The top drawer contained standard personnel files, nothing unusual. The second drawer was locked, but the third drawer, the one that was slightly open, contained something that made my blood run cold. Inside were folders labeled with the names of acquired companies, not just Meridian Financial Solutions, but dozens of others stretching back years. I pulled out our folder with shaking hands. What I found inside was a detailed breakdown of our acquisition, but not the sanitized version they'd presented to shareholders. This was the real plan. Page after page of internal memos, financial projections, and strategic analyses that painted a picture of calculated destruction. The documents revealed that Blackstone Capital had never intended to merge with us as equals. They'd targeted us specifically because we had valuable client relationships and proprietary trading algorithms that they wanted to absorb. The plan was to gut our leadership, demoralize our workforce, and strip away everything valuable before eventually shutting down our operations entirely. But it got worse. Much worse. Buried in the files was a memo from Marcus Blackstone himself, dated just 2 weeks before the acquisition announcement. The subject line read, "Project Demolition, Phase 1, Implementation." I read it with growing horror. The key to a successful extraction is the systematic dismantling of existing power structures. We've identified several high-performing individuals who could pose threats to our integration timeline. These individuals must be neutralized through strategic repositioning or elimination. See attached target list. My name was third on the list. The memo went on to detail exactly how they plan to neutralize each target. Some would be fired outright. Others would be demoted to positions so humiliating that they'd quit voluntarily. A few would be kept on in meaningless roles as examples to the remaining workforce. I was in the third category. The memo specifically stated that my demotion to facilities management would send a clear message about the consequences of resistance while maintaining plausible deniability. They hadn't just destroyed my career, they'd planned it. Every humiliation, every degrading moment, every time I'd questioned whether I'd somehow brought this on myself, had been orchestrated from the beginning. But the most damning discovery was yet to come. As I dug deeper into the files, I found evidence of a pattern. Blackstone Capital had been running the same playbook for years. They'd acquire companies, destroy their leadership, steal their intellectual property, and then sell off the pieces at a massive profit. It was corporate cannibalism on an industrial scale. And it wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. The files contained evidence of securities fraud, market manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty. They'd been lying to shareholders, regulators, and the companies they acquired. The paper trail was extensive and damning. I spent the next hour photographing everything with my phone, my hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. This was it. This was how I'd get my revenge. Not through angry confrontations or futile legal battles, but through cold, hard evidence of their crimes. When I finished, I carefully returned everything to its original position and completed my cleaning duties as if nothing had happened. But inside, I was planning. Over the next few weeks, I maintained my routine while secretly building my case. I researched securities law, contacted journalists, and reached out to former colleagues who might be willing to testify. I was careful not to arouse suspicion, continuing to clean offices and empty trash cans while my former tormentors walked past me like I was invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd made me invisible, and that invisibility had become my greatest weapon. I discovered that Marcus Blackstone had made a crucial mistake. The filing cabinet I'd found wasn't just a random storage unit, it was his personal insurance policy. He'd been keeping detailed records of every illegal activity as protection against his own board of directors. If they ever tried to scapegoat him, he'd have enough evidence to bring down the entire company. But his paranoia had become his downfall. I learned that several former employees from other acquired companies had been trying to build cases against Blackstone Capital for years, but they'd never had enough evidence. The files I'd found were the missing pieces of a much larger puzzle. My breakthrough came when I contacted Jennifer Walsh, a former executive from Hartwell Industries, one of Blackstone's earlier acquisitions. Jennifer had been pursuing a lawsuit against the company for wrongful termination, but she'd been hampered by lack of evidence. "Samantha," she said when I called her, "if you really have what you're describing, this changes everything. We can file a class action lawsuit that could bring down the entire company." "I want more than money," I told her. "I want justice." "Trust me," Jennifer said. "You'll get both." We decided to coordinate our reveal for maximum impact. Jennifer would file the lawsuit while I simultaneously released the documents to the Securities and Exchange Commission and several financial journalists who'd been investigating Blackstone Capital for years. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would continue my janitorial duties, gathering additional evidence and documenting the company's ongoing illegal activities. Meanwhile, Jennifer would prepare the legal paperwork and coordinate with other victims. But we had to be careful. If Marcus Blackstone discovered his files had been compromised, he'd destroy the evidence and possibly disappear with his offshore accounts before we could stop him. As I continued my cleaning duties, I started noticing things I'd missed before. Conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. Hushed phone calls about disposal timelines and extraction protocols. Documents left carelessly on desks that revealed the true scope of their operations. I was no longer just a janitor. I was a spy in plain sight. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day I had to smile and nod while Patricia Vance asked about my adjustment to facilities management. Every day I had to watch David Chen strut around in his stolen promotion while knowing that his success was built on lies and fraud. But I also started to see the cracks in their facade. Marcus Blackstone was increasingly paranoid, snapping at subordinates and working later into the night. Several high-level executives had quietly started looking for new jobs. The company's stock price was becoming increasingly volatile as rumors of financial irregularities began to circulate. The end came sooner than expected. I was cleaning the executive conference room on a Thursday evening when I overheard a heated phone conversation between Marcus Blackstone and someone he kept calling the Senator. They were discussing something called Project Scorched Earth. Apparently a plan to liquidate assets and transfer funds to offshore accounts before regulatory authorities could freeze them. This was it. They were about to run. I immediately called Jennifer. "It's time," I said. "They're planning to disappear." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. They're implementing some kind of escape plan. If we're going to move, it has to be now." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said finally. Let's burn them down. The next morning, everything happened at once. Jennifer filed a massive class action lawsuit alleging securities fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The SEC announced they were opening a formal investigation into Blackstone Capital's acquisition practices. The Wall Street Journal published a front-page exposé detailing the company's systematic destruction of acquired businesses. And I walked into the office carrying a box of documents instead of cleaning supplies. The transformation was immediate and devastating. Federal investigators swarmed the building, seizing computers and files. Trading was suspended on Blackstone Capital's stock. Marcus Blackstone was arrested at his home while apparently trying to board a private jet to a non-extradition country. I found myself in the unusual position of being both a witness and a whistleblower. The FBI wanted to interview me about how I discovered the files and what else I might have observed during my time as a janitor. Ms. Rivers, Agent Sarah Martinez said during my debriefing, "Your evidence is the cornerstone of this entire case. Without your discovery, these criminals would have continued destroying lives indefinitely." "I just did what anyone would do," I replied. "No," she said. "You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You turned your worst moment into everyone's salvation." The trial was a media sensation. Marcus Blackstone and his co-conspirators were facing decades in prison. The company's assets were being liquidated to compensate victims. And I was being hailed as a hero in the financial press. But the sweetest moment came when Patricia Vance was led out of the building in handcuffs. "Samantha," she called out as the FBI escorted her past me. "You don't understand what you've done. You've destroyed everything we built." "No," I replied. "I've destroyed everything you stole." The settlement was more generous than I'd ever imagined, not just for me, but for all the victims of Blackstone Capital's predatory practices. Hundreds of former employees received compensation for their wrongful terminations. Several acquired companies were restructured and returned to independence. I used my settlement money to start my own investment firm, specializing in helping small businesses protect themselves from predatory acquisitions. I called it Phoenix Financial, because sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better. David Chen, meanwhile, found himself unemployed and unemployable. His promotion had been revoked when the company collapsed, and his association with the fraud made him radioactive in the industry. He called me once, asking if I could put in a good word for him with potential employers. "I'm sorry, David," I told him. "I don't think I can help with that." 6 months later, I was back in a corner office, but this time, it was mine. I'd built Phoenix Financial from the ground up, hiring several former Meridian employees who'd been victims of the acquisition. We were small but growing, and our reputation for integrity was attracting clients who'd been burned by larger firms. I kept the navy blue uniform in my closet as a reminder. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. Frank, my old supervisor, stopped by my office one day. He looked around at the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the view of the city skyline. "So," he said with a grin, "still think it was temporary?" "No," I replied. "I think it was exactly what I needed." As I sit here now, writing this story, I can see Marcus Blackstone's former building from my window. It's been sold to a tech company that's renovating it from top to bottom. They're stripping out the old executive suites, the conference rooms where so many lives were destroyed, the filing cabinets that held so many secrets. I sometimes wonder if they'll find any evidence that we missed, some forgotten memo or hidden document that could provide even more justice for the victims. But I suspect we got everything we needed. The janitor's key card that I still carry in my wallet opens every door in that building. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful position is the one that nobody notices. Sometimes the best revenge comes not from climbing the ladder, but from knowing where all the bodies are buried. And sometimes, the person emptying your trash can is the one who's about to empty your entire life. They thought they could bury me by making me invisible. Instead, they gave me the perfect cover to expose their crimes. They thought they could humiliate me into submission. Instead, they gave me the motivation to destroy them completely. I learned that revenge isn't a dish best served cold. It's a dish best served with documentation, legal backing, and federal investigators. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge is simply watching your enemies get exactly what they deserve. The building across the street is different now. The company that destroyed so many lives is gone. The people who thought they were untouchable are in prison. And the woman they tried to break is stronger than ever. I kept my promise to Frank. The janitor job really was temporary. But the lessons I learned while wearing that uniform, about dignity, about justice, about the power of being underestimated, those are permanent. Every morning when I walk into my office, I remember what it felt like to be dismissed, diminished, and discarded. And every evening when I leave, I remember what it felt like to prove that even the most powerful people can be brought down by someone they never saw coming. That's the thing about revenge. It's not about getting back at people who wronged you. It's about ensuring that justice prevails, that truth wins out, and that the next person who finds themselves holding a mop and bucket knows that they're not powerless. They're just invisible enough to change everything.